Alright, so on stochastic with the hyperloops, and today I kind of want to do something a little different. The last set of videos I did two in a row, and I kind of wasn't sure what I wanted to go, where I wanted to go with it at the end, because I feel like I talk about the subject quite a bit, and I just really don't want to be super repetitive. But what I want to do today is pretty much a new exercise, and it kind of involves looking back at older characters when new characters come out that we feel are great, trying to figure out why the other version isn't so good. So today, or everyone already knows I've been playing Sabine, so we're going to look at another card that's very similar, and maybe just people haven't picked it up, or maybe the small differences are so huge that we really just don't take them into consideration, or because no one picked it up and no one really used the ability correctly, that it's actually a complete powerhouse and we never knew. We're going to be talking about Jin, Urso, yeah, that pile of junk. Yep. Alright, so first what we're going to do is we're going to compare. So Sabine and Jin have the same actual cost, 1520, solo die elite, blah blah blah. They both have 11 health. Now from the die side's perspective, there are wins and losses in various categories. So Jin is rocking 2 and 2 for range sides, whereas Sabine has 2 and 3. And normally speaking, the difference between 2 and 3 isn't usually very huge, but it is when we take into consideration key specific cards. So like for instance, the Sith Lord Vader versus any of the other like blue characters in Force Strike. So when Vader uses Force Strike, it's 3 and that's it. But now, if Anakin wants to use Force Strike, it's either 2 or 3 plus an additional resource. Pretty much Kylo doesn't want to use it, or base Kylo doesn't want to use it because it would cost 2 for 2 damage, 2 resources for 2 damage. New Kylo would only Force Strike for 2, so like it kind of ends up being much weaker because you could just do things like lightsaber throw when you're showing that's a melee side, and just do 2 that way instead of using your die at the same time. And cannibalizing your die is kind of pointless sometimes. So it's kind of hard to gauge if that 1 damage difference is a deal breaker. But where we lose that, we gain from the 2 discard side. So anyone that's played like any card game to like the higher levels, the one of the things that's hated the most is when our hand gets affected. Losing cards means losing your game plan, and even when we get to choose which cards we're discarding, we don't really want to play against that because it starts limiting our options. But when we have to discard randomly, it's even worse, because you look at your hand, you have plans for the next couple actions. At least you might have a whole linear game plan in general, but you're not getting anywhere near that when you have to discard. So the 2 discard side, I would say, is actually better than the 3 disrupt side. The 3 disrupt side on Sabine costs a resource, and whilst it's good from the standpoint of being able to start off rounds and just like eat their resources so they can't like cast removal or upgrades, it's slightly different because that's including her ability. So like I know it's hard to gauge from that standpoint, but so we're just looking at it from a die size perspective. I'd much rather have 2 discard than 3 disrupt for a resource. Assuming we don't have things, like C-3PO that can use that, that's 3 damage, etc. So the 2 discard side is actually much scarier than the 3 disrupt. From there is where we take another turning point. Jin has another discard side, but it's only for 1. The 1 discard side is heavily lacking. There are going to be situations where it's very good, and that'll usually be when your opponent's missing their die rolls, and they're being forced into re-rolls, and then that 1 discard could take their last re-roll away and make it so that they get stuck with whatever die resolutions they have left on the table. But Sabine has the shield side, and the shield side is the equivalent to 1 health. So the weird thing about shields is people hate them. They like, there's some adverse reaction in the mind when you have a shield side and you're like, oh, it's a shield. Oh. Like, if it was 2 shields, it's like it almost flips the script. You're just like, ooh, 2 shields, yes. And like, you kind of have to think of that as an interchangeable 1 damage, because the longer that your character stays alive, the more time you have to do your damage in other sides. And then hold on 1 second, because I got a phone call. So yeah, continuing on. I really actually like the fact that that has a pause feature that makes it so much better than the other phone that I had. The only difference is the camera's on the opposite side, so I get a kind of low to up view, which I'm not a big fan of because I'm overweight, and that it doesn't look very appealing. But anyways, so what was I saying? Oh yeah, the shield side. So like the staying alive gets it so that you can then use whatever upgrades or abilities you have to output more damage. And there are times where your opponent will have like exact lethal, and you have a shield side showing, and that gets you that extra round. And 1 extra round with Sabine, based on her ability, is huge. You wouldn't be able to do nearly as much with Jin because her ability is different. But once again, we'll get to the abilities section later. I probably should have addressed that first, I guess. So the 1 discard side, in my view, is much worse than the 1 shield side. And then they both have, you know, obvious resource side plus a blank. So next we'll just go over the ability, because the team pairings are pretty much the exact same, because it's just 10 points. You would normally play the deck a little bit differently based on the scenarios, but it's the same setup. So now, so now we're looking at the ability wise. So Sabine's ability at times is very lackluster, and the times where it's not good is pretty much like that first action of the game, and at any point in time where you don't have an ambush weapon in the discard pile that you can cast, and or in your hand to override an existing ambush weapon or an upgrade so that you can bring it back and get that free action. Pulling weapons from the discard pile will give you a positive matchup versus any mill decks, and any opponents who do discard sides, Thrawn, etc., because they cannot get rid of they're not going to be able to get rid of the upgrade permanently. Like, you get to just pull it back. So you have a plus matchup there due to her ability. We're ignoring the thermal portion of her ability because or at least I found that to be mediocre. Your deck has to be fast, or fast enough, because you need to decrease your opponent's damage. So the thermals seem very weak up until the point where you get to start, like, pick up thermal paint, do a damage, overwrite with second chance, because that is much better. But at what point do you really want that? So do you give up the slots in the deck? I recently have cut all the thermal paints. Thermal detonator I didn't bother running because it actually just wasn't very good there. The 2 resources, and then you have to like do a bunch of stuff to get the damage out, was just not viable enough. But that's neither here nor there. But the ability to get the action cheat so that you can roll out your dice and then decide what you're doing is very huge. From a normal standpoint, it kind of doesn't matter. Where it does come into play is the fact that good chunks of the yellow removal, Lothcat, Negotiate, require you to have a die in the pool. Same with like Cross. I want to say Cross Interference. I do not recall the name, but it's Cross something. It's one of the Lando where you pay to cannibalize one of your yellow character dice, and then I think you get to resolve one of your opponent's die. So yeah, those are double cross. Yeah, those are all they require your die in the pool. So Jin, if not going first, doesn't get to do stuff like that, and Sabine would get to potentially resolve damage to get a kill, If you combine it with running interference as well, it'll let you either A, limit your opponent from activating, or B, you get to resolve and then say your opponent can't resolve. And like the thing here with running interference is that you do the spin trigger first, you get the before, you roll out, you see your die results prior to deciding running interference or not. So if you have lethal for the character that may be out already, or a character in general, you can just choose to have them not be capable of activating, and then they're going to have to cast a card, whether it's some piece of removal or an upgrade or something. And that can, if they pass and you've killed their guy, like, you can pass and go to the next round and just be in crazy position. In the situation where, let's say you're killing some other guy and your opponent has good dice out, then you can say they can't resolve. And then being able to go, okay, you can't resolve, then means you have time to get to your next action to play a piece of removal. So you got to use your good dice. Then they couldn't resolve, so you get to get your next action after they do whatever, and then cast your Loth Cat and Mouse, and you lose your bad dice or whatever, and take out their best die. Those plays go a very long way to making the deck very good. So as I'm speaking through this, it just makes Jin feel worse and worse because everything's very slow. But I'm gonna give Jin a shot and see where it goes, just because her ability is it can be kind of amazing over the course of a game. The longer that she stays alive, the more that you're essentially generating free resources. So Sabine is generating free actions, whereas Jin can just get one free resource via a yellow event every round, but there are severe limitations. So because it has to be the first event, instead of you can play one event per round at a decrease, it means that you cannot lead out with things like smuggling, truce, friends in low places. You have to actually like get your free resource prior, which really inhibits part of her ability. If they just let you free one resource for a yellow event at any point in time, then so like just power action, play a yellow event from your hand at the cost reduction of 1, she'd be so much better, because you wouldn't have to worry about the timing and order of your stuff. The timing and the order of your stuff sets really bad situations, because let's say you've like rolled out Ezra and then you just kind of want a Loth Cat because your dice are bad. You don't get that option. You would pretty much get stuck using something like Double Cross, or whatever other Electroshock or whatever you're deciding to use, because you want to get your one resource out, or out of our ability. So you kind of end up getting like forced into more higher costing events, and then now if you have to cast 2 events in a round, you're screwing yourself, and the order thing is huge. So like there are small things here that limit her, and like Sabine's really not limited by this. She just pulls a weapon before she activates, so whenever you're deciding to do it, you can just do it or not do it, and you don't have to think about too much as far as order. You just have to like get the weapon in the discard pile. So sure, that could take a couple actions, but that's really only in the first round. In subsequent rounds, you're usually pretty safe about it, because you could just prior to the end of the round, you can just re-overwrite one of the ambush weapon you want to use with something else, second chance, or other upgrades, based on what version you're playing. So it's kind of brutal from that standpoint. But so yeah, going back into Jin, the things I think people would want to focus on are not things like reversal. Reversal is a pretty bad card from a cost for cost standpoint. So let's say you're playing against Vader, and he rolls a 3. If you pay the 3 for reversal, we're ignoring Jin right here. If you pay the 3 for reversal, you are giving up 3 resources, a card, and you are stopping 3 damage and dealing 3 damage. From the normal, 1 resource plus 1 card equals 2 damage, EV, which we pretty much would call EV0 at this point. Like it's the average. It's what you're expected. If you're getting less than that, it's negative EV. If you're getting better, it's positive. You're not doing much. Like, yes, it's a big swing as far as being able to flip a 3 into somebody, but like that's your like best function for it. I guess you could hit things like rocket launcher or ATST, but that's few and far between. Hitting a 3 is like your max. So if Jin uses reversal for 3, then you have a plus EV play, which is more inclined to kind of trick you into playing it. Because you're going to be like, oh, well, I can start off the round with it, pay 2, and then do it. But the new questions are being like, was that worth it? I guess in that situation, it's probably worth it, because it'll kind of be like playing a one-shot upgrade for 3 damage. Like, you're okay with that because you saved 3 health and did that. That's probably just better than like something like Second Chance, which heals you 5. But it doesn't feel great because your resources are gone for the turn. You're sapped. You have to figure what else you're going to be doing. So like if they got an upgrade before you did that, like they furthered their game plan and you haven't. So it's why there's just bad situations where you will stop 2 damage for 1 resource and feel great about it. But if so let's say every time I roll out, you stop both of my dice for 2 damage, but I'm playing upgrades, I'm going to then start chipping away 1s and 2s, and eventually I'm going to have additional dice that you no longer have, or like you don't have access to because you didn't get upgrades out. So you have to be very cautious about that. I'd probably still run reversal in Jin because it's probably the necessary evil. Now, another card is Rebel. Rebel works with Jin sides. It's a 55% clip to show a discard side, and it'll let you play a card from your discard pile. And since Rebel costs 1 and it reduces the cost of whatever is by 1, when Jin plays it, it's like Jin is actually playing the card from the discard pile. That card is very, very strong with Jin. There are some downfalls which are unfortunate, and that downfall is primarily that when you're playing an upgrade and you're putting it on Jin herself, because she's already rolled out to have that discard side showing, it's not great. So that's kind of unfortunate for her ability, but if we take into consideration that between Scavenge and Rebel you would have access to 6 second chances, it kind of changes the spectrum quite a bit, because if you can feasibly if you can build the deck to feasibly do enough damage to kill an opposing guy round 2, you could just set up the "you can't kill me" because I have 1,000,000 second chances, providing that you find it. So I think there is some inner workings there, because I've played a lot of the Sabine deck and like, oh, you know, try killing me, I have a 1,000,000 second chances, and it was very good, especially with Starship Graveyard, because people don't want to give you the graveyard knowing that if they can't kill you fast enough, you kind of almost just lock them out of the game, because it's too much for them to recover from. As long as you have a viable enough engine, they can't get out of the second chance locks, because they're getting hit for 2s and 3s around while they're trying to do 5 plus damage, because you'll have the second chance out. They had to do it a minute, like your guy's not dead, so they would have to have done like 6, 7, 8 damage at least to kill your guy through that with the second chance. Which if it's a 1v1 or the 1v2 situations, because they went straight after Jin, then like you're in a commanding position, and that's not to mention the fact that you're probably throwing some of their dice back at them between like double crosses, the reversal, or just having like free electroshocks, which are very strong there. So I think there is some promise. The big thing is that you have to focus on actually getting rid of or killing a guy, which is going to be the harder part. It's much easier for Sabine, because Sabine gets the action cheat into a kill. Jin does not, so we'd have to figure out where to go from that. I don't think we need action cheats that are like partnerships, because then we'd have to run like a support, like a Chopper. And whilst I have no problem with Chopper, it's not an amazing card. Maybe it is. Maybe we'll try it. But we'll put the pile together. It's gonna kind of look like Sabine Ezra, and we're gonna see how it plays out. Maybe we can learn something from it to put towards Sabine Ezra. But I like the theory, at least, of you should have enough key or free removal that it screws with the opponent. Damage wise, you get to reflect damage and hopefully get that kill within time. One of the big issues with the meta is that if you're playing against an opposing Sabine or like Cad Bane, they're going to action cheat their damage. So now your reversals and double crosses actually don't really work. If they re-roll into damage, that's perfectly fine, but you have to worry about those. You have to worry about running interferences, and it's the matchup is not amazing because of that. If Jin was a power action, then you could ignore running interference entirely, because you would just power action into whatever the piece of removal is. But there's also some interesting things if we run Hidden Agenda, because now we can use Hidden Agenda to turn things like Reversal into a complete one cost, or quote-unquote free, if it was like a subsequent round. So things like that could be pretty beastly, I guess, is what I would say, because the current thinking is that we only get one reduction per round. So if we cast a free shock, then they're like, oh, they're safe. But if we have a Hidden Agenda, now like hyperspace jump comes into play, which I don't think we'll use because Jin is kind of slow. But we would probably we would questionably use Never Tell Me the Odds, because now it costs us 2, and whatever upgrades and stuff we have on Jin, we can just be like, all right, flip this to 2/2/2, 2/2/3, or whatever we have. And like that's another downfall. Sabine's 3 damage side is very relevant when you're affecting her dice, because now it's like, oh, this is 3/3 and then 2, you're hitting for 8 with just 1 upgrade. But Jin would, with 1 upgrade, hit for 2/2/2. This is ignoring the DL 3 damage side and X8's 3 damage for resource side, assuming that we can't really pay for those because we haven't resource gen'd. But I think it's an interesting concept. I'm not particularly excited, but I think it's something to try to bring to the table. It's very important to look at decks as a whole, and understand like why they do well, what's going on. Like a lot of the time, it's not singular abilities that just win the game. It's those abilities combined with the surrounding compatible parts that bring everything together. Because like Sabine's ability by itself is like, yeah, whatever. But when you combine it with 6 ambush weapons and your removal that needs dice there, running interference, like it becomes so much more abusable than anything else. And not to mention the fact that if you hit the second running interference and you do any of the Sabine stuff, your opponent probably has to claim. So in the situations where either my opponent cast something or didn't roll out first, or I have the battlefield, if I have 2 running interferences with Sabine, I can I could like cast a card like Truce or something like that, or an ambush upgrade, activate her, pull out an ambush upgrade. I could then resolve whatever damage I have, and I'll have activated both running interferences on play a card and activate a character, and that would then mean that the opponent has to pass or claim, unless they have something with an action ability in play. Because if they do that, it bypasses the whole RI lock anyways. But if they don't, now I've resolved damage, so if they pass, I pass, we go to the next round, I attempt to do it again. And that could actually just straight up kill a guy, because the hope there is that I'm hitting for 2 or 3 damage. I probably have 2 upgrades out, to be fair, because I would have probably had one already, and then this would be the second one. So I think hitting for somewhere in 2 to 4 damage is easily doable. And sometimes you're going to get those shots that are like 5, 6, 7. If your opponent claims to get out of the lock, then you get to fix the rest of your dice via your hand and rerolls for the rest of the round. And if they pass, you just pass and go to the next round and attempt to do it again. Unless you know for a fact like all of your ambush triggers are gone, then you kind of just decide. But even then, let's say you did 4 damage via 2 of your dice, like it's much better for you to just get those dice again, or have access to them and try to get the damage again with 2 more resources now, and potentially just filtering through whatever cards in your hand to find second chances or other stuff that you could use. So like Jin doesn't have access to any of that. It's definitely a different deck as a whole. It's not as broken from a uninterruptible standpoint, but I think there is some merit there. Also, it depends on what we see for any rules reference guide erratas, anything that gets changed. If some of the higher decks get slowed down a little bit, we could see. Actually, if any of the higher decks get slowed down a bit, we're probably going to see just more Cad Phasma and Sabine, which makes the Jin theories much worse. The Jin theories right now versus like FNs and Kylos. Actually, Kylo just crushes Jin mono yellow, so it doesn't matter. So I think that's all out the window maybe. But the discard side is good versus them. So like it's really hard to tell. Like it's something you'd have to sit there and actually play. But I do like the theory on it, and this is me talking about Jin. Trying to think if there's anything else of merit. Like I plan to run it with Ezra still, so we'll still have active or accessibility to the whole like truce, and then steal your resource or disrupt your resource depending on what I need. So we'll see how that goes, but I lose the Sabine disrupt, which also works with truce, because you can just like rip your ambush back, truce, and then eat their 3 resources. But I'm trying to think if there's any other parting thoughts that I can think of here. I don't know. If there was meta dependent stuff with Jin, I can't think of any other of yellow events that I think are just so ridiculous. Like we're already running rebels to reuse things like double cross, reversal, shocks. So like those all seem very good, and then pulling back like second chances and stuff. What is up with these people? People are retarded. I don't know. Zipper theory is really wrong with people in this state sometimes. But yeah, so I think for the most part it'd be interesting to try out the Jin stuff. It may just be complete and utter junk, waste of time. The action differential could be just that huge, as well as like the damage side. But I think 2 discard is relevant enough where people would be pretty happy. So we'll kind of just see where it takes us. And yeah, thanks for listening to me. Try to keep it under 30 minutes in situations where I can, because if not, I think I just ramble. So like I can't really think of anything else with Jin. I've never really played her, but we're looking at the same health as Sabine, so I think there's at least a solid theory there. There may be potential for like some tier 2 stuff if it's just not good enough. It's probably not as tier 3s as it should be, just because the damage flip cards work pretty well versus some of the mainstream decks right now. If you get the double cross or reversal, like Cad Bane's 3 at a price reduction, it's huge. You don't often get to do it, but you get those, and discarding cards from people's hands in this format or the current format could be very strong, because a lot of people don't have amazing die sides, and we have to like re-roll quite a bit. So we'll kind of see how it goes, and look forward to it. Thanks for listening, guys. Deuces.